Leftist leaders want their followers confused. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I apologize for not posting any videos for a while, but I've been having a really rough go of it in my personal life over the past week, and I simply haven't had time in between working on finalizing a project for my channel that I'll promise that you'll be really excited by, and other stuff. However, there are two things of note. For one, Gaytriarchy will be on tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and our guest is a very confirmed Chadwick Moore, who apologizes tremendously about missing last week's episode due to being on a camping trip. I'm not sure if tomorrow's episode will be on the new channel, which you need to subscribe to before I feel safe having important streams there, or I might have it on this channel so that it will get more views, so that I can collect super chats, because I'm in a very sincere need of finances right now, as I have been spending money I don't really have to pay for my project, as well as some other things going on in my personal life. Anyhow, over the course of the last week, I have been somewhat aghast by just how thick-headed leftists really are. I know, I already knew that, but I am still shocked. I suppose it's because I vaguely removed myself from the day-to-day grind of observing or participating in the culture war or whatever, and in starting to really look at it again, I formed a new feeling of surprise around the complete and utter irrationality of leftist and democratic true believers. For one, they have almost unanimously shrugged off the overall glowing praise for Trump's State of the Union in favor of telling people like myself on Facebook that although an approximate 76% of people approved of his speech, and that his approval rating jumped tremendously as he spoke of such great leftist valued things as criminal justice reform and the lowest unemployment of all time for minority communities, these people told me that I was wrong about people liking his speech. I have nothing profound to say about that because I don't think that there's any words that are necessary, and being that these interactions happened on Facebook and I don't want to pull up examples of these people tritely and predictably burying their heads in the sand from over a week ago, I'll ask you to kindly take my word for it. Leftist true believers care much more about this still photo of Nancy Pelosi looking vaguely sarcastic, as if that was some sort of pwn of Trump, than they do about any words of this speech. Next, I was confronted with this footage of everybody's second favorite new DNC congressional whack job, Ilhan Omar, deciding that it was her personal radical leftist, intersectional feminist, Marxist, Muslim, or whatever, duty to grill Venezuelan envoy Elliot Abrams over his alleged role in the Iran-Contra affair, which happened well over 30 years ago, and Omar probably knows very little about, as she wasn't old enough to remember any of it clearly. Now granted, I realize that accusing a National Congress person of not knowing what she is talking about is a bold claim for me to make, but I am perfectly willing to stand by it, considering Representative Omar is so obviously unintelligent that she decided it was a good idea to claim that Lindsey Graham must be compromised because of his support of Trump, despite the fact that there's literally actually no tangible evidence, and many people believe that she must have been referring to the long-standing rumor in Washington that Lindsey Graham is a homosexual in the closet. And if that's true, that's a very bad look, which is completely, absurdly homophobic in a way only an intersectional feminist Muslim affirmative action hire could dream of. Representative Omar is by no means the sharpest saber in the armory, so when she brings up the Iran-Contra affair that happened starting around the time that she was born, it seems fairly clear that she is just reciting regurgitated far leftist talking points that leftists know that they are supposed to recite when they want to attack Republicans that have been around for a while, in spite of the fact that very few leftists even understand the Iran-Contra saga properly, because it was actually very complicated and I barely get it myself, and I recently studied it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush.
Look at the way she reads every line of that sheet of paper as if she doesn't know what she is talking about. And also keep in mind that the charges against the man in no way proved any nefarious involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, but technically simply showed that he withheld information from Congress.
I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
Okay, that's quite an amazing leap she just made. And here's the thing. She was smiling with what appears to be duping delight, as if she knows perfectly well that she is accusing him of something that has no logical basis towards discrediting him in the current year. But she's giddy with excitement that she might get away with it. I'll show you the clip again, right after this clip from an expert interrogator.
We commit terrible crimes and we smile at the delight in getting away with it. Now that smile is known in the trade as duping delight, and we're going to see.
I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
Now, in this next part, as any man would, he attempts to simply respond to the absurdly bizarre way of saying that he's not trustworthy now because he lied to Congress in the 1980s, which she had obviously only accused him of because the Iran-Contra affair revolved around the Reagan administration conducting secret deals to sell weapons to Iran so that they could arm an anti-socialist army in Central America, and we can assume she doesn't like the fact that a guy who was tangentially associated with an operation of shady transactions with Iran to arm people against socialists in Central America, she doesn't like that such a man is involved in Venezuela because she is both an Islamist and a far leftist, so watch her refuse to even let him speak because, of course, white male capitalists are the enemy to her.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That
was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
Also, did you see the leftist activist-looking older woman with a white t-shirt that appears to have writing on it in the background, who seems to be literally biting her lip to keep from busting up laughing at Omar's absurd display? I'll crop the image to a close-up on her because she has to be worth something here. Both women know that Omar is trying to use complete loose association to character assassinate this man.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That
was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was.
Now, look at her accuse the man of something regarding a dismissal of a massacre that apparently he didn't believe happened numerous decades ago, and then watch her try to put words into his mouth regarding an unrelated statement of his, which apparently celebrated the freedom of El Salvador after United States involvement.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
As you'll see, clearly his later praise of the El Salvadorian freedom was dependent upon him sincerely believing that the aforementioned massacre didn't happen because it was covered up. But even still, he chooses to believe that overall it was a good thing that El Salvador got its freedom. Finally, watch this next part and remember what I said about the duping delight at the beginning of this section, and think about why on earth she would be smiling while talking about what she's talking about if she wasn't knowingly trying to attempt some sort of political framing of this man's reputation.
You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
He's not wrong at all, is he? Personally, my only uncertainty here is about whether or not she is one of the far leftist leaders who is attempting to confuse her followers, or if she herself is one of the confused true believer followers herself, or if there's really much point in attempting to draw a distinction there at all with the far left at this point, because it seems like they are all completely deranged true believers. Regardless, there's another thing that I noticed over the past week, which is the dramatic deafening silence that came as a result of the Senate committee composed of both Democrats and Republicans looking at Mueller's investigation results that he gathered after the FBI examined basically everybody even vaguely associated with Trump for over 2 years, only to claim perfectly clearly that they have no evidence of Russian collusion. Being that I was sidelined for the last week and not engaging in looking at sites or in hardly any internet discussions, I assumed that this news would be somewhat noteworthy to the brainwashed leftist true believers. But it turns out that not only wasn't it noteworthy, but it's like they didn't even hear anybody mention it, and when you do mention it, apparently they refuse to acknowledge that it even happened. Seriously, according to them, Trump still definitely is a Russian puppet, and they know so because Trump is a icky mean man, which means that he was put into the Oval Office by Russians, because only Russians could make an icky mean man win. So Donald Trump must be as icky and gross as they say because he needed Russians to get elected, which is proof that Trump really did work with the Russians, in spite of the fact that there is officially no evidence. I realize that train of thought sounds absurd, but that's what leftists like this guy seem to believe. I saw him just today. He is the commentator in blue, and somebody fairly reasonable is commenting in red. Curious, how do you feel to find out that Trump's campaign had no ties to Russian collusion? And of course, somebody did the trademark laugh at the comment because they clearly find it so absurd. And the guy says in response, "It takes two to fight, and he is directly involved with Russia." Yawn. "I'm not conceding anything. He is a POS, not a POTUS." This must be in reference to something else that they said. "What do you have to say about this?" and he posts the news from NBC. The most thorough political investigation in United States history, taking place over the course of 2 years, revealing nothing. What do you say about that? And why do you claim he is still directly involved with Russia? Premature news, and Mueller's not done yet, and I have my rights to my opinion. Give it up. I don't want to hear one more word about that piece of garbage maggot. Obviously, this level of illogic is enough to make one's head spin, but here's the thing. The leftist true believers aren't probably really believers at all, because I don't think that they know what they believe. They have almost universally been raised in or are brainwashed by postmodern leftist subjective revision of facts and reason, where being logical and citing statistics can and will be seen as racist, sexist, or transphobic, and saying that Obama was maybe the worst president of our lifetime due to the economy is sheer blasphemy. Not only are these people completely incapable of understanding or even vaguely comprehending political reality when it is presented to them conveniently on a social media interaction, but the more diabolical part of it is that there are literally propaganda blogs like Vox that are still in business, who at this point seem to be doing everything they possibly can to confuse their readers about whether or not there's a possibility that Trump maybe, might, sorta, maybe, possibly, kinda, sorta, maybe, potentially have ties with Russia, hoping to lead their gullible readers on. Seriously, just attempt to read this article for yourself, which I refuse to go through myself in this video. It's as if the author is saying, so, Mueller's investigation hasn't uncovered anything, but that might be because Mueller wasn't trying. Because Mueller said at one point that he wasn't trying, but that doesn't mean that Mueller wasn't really trying, and also Mueller wasn't even the head of the investigation the whole time, so while Mueller hasn't found anything, he might just be saving the best for last, and Trump could still be Putin's animated robot. Ultimately, the thing is this. There is no logical or rational arguments to justify far leftist and or Democratic Party stances in the current year, except for a few outliers in the Democratic Party. These people have backed themselves into such a dramatically grim corner by making every political mistake and then deciding to patch up those mistakes with blatant propaganda and downright lies for over 5 years straight. Honestly, I believe that the only option that they have left is purposefully confusing their loyal followers, which is obviously already in their toolkit because, long story short, that's probably the main practical usage of postmodernism anyway. Okay, tune in tomorrow for Gatriarchy, and please do help me out on PayPal if you can. Times really are tough.